Hi, welcome to Danny After Dark. If you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a notification or a new episode. Tonight, I'll be featuring the case of Evelyn Dick. So let's go ahead and find out more. Let's go ahead and dive on in. Evelyn Dick was born as Evelyn McLean on October 13th, 1920, in Beamsville, near Niagara Falls. Her parents were Donald and Alexandra McLean. A year after she was born, the family moved to Hamilton, Ontario. Evelyn's childhood was not particularly happy. Her father drank way too much alcohol, and her mother had an angry temper. Her parents didn't get along, so they spent most of the time apart. Evelyn also didn't hang out much with the other neighborhood kids. As a teenager, she became the focus of rumors. This was because she had more expensive jewelry and furs that were within her means. She spent much of her time in the company of much older men and at places out of town and at racetracks. Evelyn tried hard to become recognized in the finer circles of town. She would host lavish parties at the Royal Connaught Hotel. This hotel was Hamilton's finest hotel. However, her social acceptance was never reciprocated in the way that she wanted. In 1942, Evelyn gave birth to a daughter, Heather White. However, Heather was born with mental disabilities, and this required a lot of attention from her mother and her grandparents. 1943, Evelyn sadly gave birth to a stillborn baby. September 5th, 1944, Evelyn gave birth to a son, Peter David White. Well, this birth of her son spread rumors about her even further. To stop these rumors, Evelyn would say that she was married, and she was married to a man who was stationed overseas by the last name, you guessed it, of White. While later examination of military records failed to prove that the existence of such a person even existed. So no one is really certain who the father was for any of her children. June 1945, Evelyn made an announcement that in 2 weeks she was going to marry a gentleman named John Dick. This came as quite a surprise, especially to her own mother, because Alexandra had never even heard of John Dick. Let's put it in perspective. Evelyn was a beautiful woman who moved her way into the upper class circles of Hamilton society. So when she married John Dick in 1945, he was a Hamilton Street Railway conductor. And that came as a surprise to many. That wasn't the type of job somebody like her would go for in a mate. Now, reports state that the relationship was full of issues and ended really quickly. For example, 5 days after she married John, she cheated on him. Shortly after, they separated. March 16th, 1946, a group of children were playing on the Niagara Escarpment, which is in Hamilton, Ontario. Part of the way down the slope amongst the trees, the children saw what they thought was the body of a pig. So they got closer. Upon further examination and closer examination, they realized what they saw was not the body of a pig. It was part of a human body. The police were contacted, and when they arrived, they realized it was the naked torso of a man. The torso was soon identified as belonging to John Dick. John had been reported missing earlier on March 6th by his cousin. Evelyn, who was 26 years old at the time of her husband's death, was questioned, and suspicion was quickly falling upon her. For example, while being interviewed by police, Evelyn responded to the news that the torso that they found belonged to her husband. She said, quote, "Don't look at me. I know nothing about it," end quote. She then proceeded to tell police a story, a very far-fetched story about an Italian hitman who arrived at her door looking for John. He said that he was going to, quote, "fix him," end quote, for messing around with his wife. But he then left without even telling Evelyn who he was. A couple of days later, police learned that Evelyn borrowed a large Packard car from a man named Bill Landig. Bill, when he got the car back, noticed it had blood covering the front seat. The seat covers were missing, and there was bloody clothing in the back. Evelyn left a note to try to explain it by saying that her daughter, Heather, had cut herself and made the mess. The detectives, upon getting the vehicle and testing the blood, proved that the blood was the same type as John's. At this point, when confronted with this, Evelyn changed her story. She now told police that a mysterious man had called her and told her that John had made a woman pregnant and that he was going to get what was coming to him. The caller then asked her to meet with him so that he could borrow a car. Evelyn explained to police that she went and met the man, and he had a large sack with him. The man told her that the sack contained, quote, "part of John," end quote. So then she drove this man and his cargo to the dumping site. Evelyn then decided to take police on the route that she claimed they followed, when police just flat out asked her if it was alarming to her that her husband's body was in the vehicle. She said she wasn't happy about his demise, but it was also a, quote, "pretty mean trick to break up a home," end quote. This statement was referring to the woman who John had allegedly got pregnant. Evelyn denied conspiring to kill her husband, John. In the backyard of her home, police found bits of human bones mixed with some cinders from the furnace. Now, how is she going to explain this to police? Then another discovery was made. In the attic of Evelyn's home, police found the body of an infant boy. He was found encased in concrete inside of a suitcase. The body was identified as her son, Peter. Evelyn now had another story for police. She said that Bill Bahuzik had murdered John and murdered her son, Peter. Incriminating evidence, such as bullet holes in a pipe, a revolver and cartridges, saws, and bloodstained shoes that were John's, were found in her father, Donald McLean's basement. Evelyn, Bill, and Donald were all charged with the murder of John Dick. Bill Bahuzik, he had his own trial. He ended up walking away as a free man, as Evelyn refused to give testimony in his trial. Donald McLean, Evelyn's father, he also had his own trial. He was convicted of being an accessory to murder. He received a 5-year sentence. October 1946, Evelyn had her trial. It began and only lasted 9 days. Her trial drew hundreds of people who were gathered outside of the courthouse during the proceedings. This was a trial unlike other for that time. When it became time for jury deliberations, They took less than 2 hours. They came back with a verdict. They found Evelyn Dick guilty of the murder of her husband. She was given the death sentence, although her conviction for the murder of her husband was overturned on an appeal. Evelyn was also found guilty of the murder of her son, Peter. For that, she received a life sentence. However, Evelyn only served 11 years of that life sentence. When she left prison in 1958, she was given a new identity and then disappeared. That is the case of Evelyn Dick. Thank you for sticking around for another episode of Danny After Dark. Do you have any questions on the case? Leave it down below. Let's be interactive. Do you have a suggestion for a case that you'd like me to cover? Well, leave it down below. You may see it featured in an upcoming episode. Until next time, remember, we don't live in darkness. Darkness lives in us.